It's wonderful to be here. I'm Reverend Cindy Paulos on Maui, and I'm talking to a very dear friend, Father Carel-Piet van Eeden, who's with the White Robe Monks of Saint Benedictine in South Africa. From here to there. Aloha, Father. How are you?
Yes, Cindy, I'm very well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm so feeling like Spirit wants to speak. Uh, I,
Very much.
I'm so excited to be able to share our experiences that we've had. When my sister passed away last summer, July 29th, you did a mass for her. And then I felt her spirit, and spirit was speaking through me. And, it's interesting because I write every day after I meditate, Father. And I never quite know what's going to come out. I mean, literally, I start writing and I'm not sure, but there was this month of amazing messages I just started posting. And you saw some of them and put music to them. And I was so thrilled because I can write a little bit of music, but I mainly do words. And when your music came, something clicked. I was, wow, how wonderful. Wouldn't this be a nice way to honor my sister? Is to put this out as music from her. And I think the first one I wrote was In the Hands of God, and then I wrote When Spirit Speaks, and then there were others. But it was really interesting how we connected that way.
Definitely. I remember well reading the first one, which was In the Hands of God. Um, and the music just came. And I'd been training in music for many years, but I hadn't written for a long time. And I remember you and I had a discussion about 8 or almost 10 years ago as well, uh, about this dream of working together. And it never really manifested until those words appeared and the music came. And it was such a beautiful, beautiful journey because the music hasn't stopped since then. We had to stop the album at a couple of songs, but the music is still there, and it is so humbling because you see that it sounds very simple in my head, or the music, and it's anybody can do it. It doesn't sound extremely special, if that makes sense, and yet where we are now, it is very powerful.
Well, an element that made it so beautiful was connecting with Stephen Malillo, who's done 1,249, I believe, pieces, orchestrations, movie soundtracks, many beautiful pieces. And then when he started doing orchestrations based on your music, it brought on this other level of life that was so beautiful. And the topic we're going to talk about today is when spirit speaks and the language of
Yes,
spirit. And spirit speaks to me in words. I think my sister's spirit especially came through and influenced that. And spirit spoke to you through the music. And Stephen is also a man who was able to capture, I think, our vision of what we had in mind. And he was able to bring it together with this really beautiful, uplifting, spiritual music that just lifts your heart, and soul.
yes, definitely. I think in for me the best description of Stephen's work with what we did is he created this bowl of perfection into which the voice can fit, and to lift that voice into exactly what we need, to spread the message.
I like that term. That sounds almost like a chalice. I really like that term. That's so nice. I mean, thank you. That bowl of spirit. Wow, how sweet is that? Well, I wrote one of the songs of the words that I wrote, and you put music to, was one I thought we could talk about today, because when I get these messages, I know that there's actually, they're teachings for me in a way. I know they're kind
Yes.
of there to guide me, and it's really wonderful when I find something that speaks to me. And I really felt this one spoke to me, and I wrote, "When spirit speaks, I listen, and from the soul I hear light that carries frequencies that from God now appear. When spirit reaches out to me, I go inside that space. The robe that has been offered holds such amazing grace. There is a sacred chalice that is offered in your name. The sacrament is given to lift what words cannot say. When spirit speaks, I listen and go inside that inner space where there's a way to connect and communicate and pray. I ask, dear Lord, my Savior, to speak to me each day and to inspire and lead me by messages you bring my way. When Spirit speaks, I listen in great humility and wonder at the miracle that works so mysteriously. And it's interesting, Father, I don't memorize poems that well, but now that I've heard it in song, I can remember the words better.
That's beautiful. And it's the first time that I've heard you read this poem. And a couple of things are coming up immediately. And I'm actually
Chicken,
getting.
we call them chicken skin here, but it's called goosebumps. In Hawaii, it's called chicken skin, but in the rest of the
Yes.
country, it's called goosebumps. I don't know what you call it in South Africa.
So goosebumps in English, but in Afrikaans, it'll be hoendervleis, which is chicken skin, basically.
Oh, so you're
So,
saying
so
Hawaii. Interesting.
yes. And um, when we listen, I mean, as a member of the White Robed Monks of St. Benedict, we have two rules in our order. And the first rule is the rule of St. Benedict. And the first word of St. Benedict's rule is listen, which is such a powerful, powerful thing. That is almost the whole, the monastic side is listening and waiting for the voice of God. So it is such a powerful, powerful word. Um, and we can't do that if the mind is active and if it's running around the whole time. And we then ask God, where are you? Why aren't you answering my prayers? Yet we don't take that time every single day to just become quiet and spend time in any way that works for us. But just spend that time alone with the Lord. So it's such an apt song to start off with for me, and it's a very special one for me.
Well, and there's listening, and I do
Mhm.
a lot of interviews, and it's
Yes.
always interesting to hear when you communicate. And I'll take that, break it down to communicate, because if you're really listening, there's a communion that happens, which I find in meditation, I'm able to get from spirit and from God. Now, again, it's so interesting because you can pray, but oftentimes that's a communication. Again, it's communing, but many times it's a communication where you're expressing something to God. Then in
Mhm.
meditation, and I started thinking about this years ago. In meditation, you listen, and when you put them together, um, you then absorb and you can integrate. Once you absorb it into your being, then hopefully, and with skill and time, you learn the tools to put it to work in your life. And now that can be the hardest part. I mean, for me, meditation and prayer is really easy because I've been doing it all my life.
Yes.
But to use those tools in your life is interesting. And you do that. Even though you're a father, you have a daily work regimen and you do things for the church and for what you're doing in your practice, but you also have your other work you do. And how is it when we get this input or listen or get messages? How do you find and how do you land up putting it to work in your life?
So for me, my morning starts at 4 a.m. With a session of contemplative prayer. And in that time, what you do is contemplative prayers, you have your reading, the Lectio Divina, and then you spend 20 minutes opening up almost like a plant. And they say the Venus flytrap, and you wait for God, which is such a beautiful way of seeing it. So it is a challenging exercise, but after that, Mass follows, where you then talk to God, and that's where the communion follows. Um, and then I go into my day, yes. And I'm blessed enough to work in a medical practice where we want to bring in spirituality. We've lost the idea that if you go see the doctor, that you are still a spiritual being, and there are physical links with the spiritual and the disease. So we see these silos, and we try and bridge those silos then. And that's where whatever happens in the morning is a beautiful prelude into the day, because we don't separate secular life anymore from spiritual life. Um, Everything is a spiritual exercise. If you're an accountant and you're doing books, it is still a spiritual exercise. And that's, yeah, the way that I perceive it.
I think that is the way that it is the best practice to have in the living of it. And it's interesting because in this poem I wrote about the robe, when I saw a vision of Mother Mary, she was wearing this beautiful blue, midnight blue, deep blue robe with stars on it, and then it was conveyed to me through spirit that this robe is the robe of protection. um, and it's interesting. I practiced all my life, and once when I was studying Zen, they wanted me to wear the robes of Zen, and I said, "Well, what happens when I take my robes off? I'm still needing to feel like I'm the same whether I wear robes or don't." But and so I had this thing about robes, but then I changed it when I had this vision of Mary and how the robe of protection doesn't have to be a physical robe. It can
Mm.
be taking on that spiritual robe that you wear, that there's another level of robes. I mean, when we drop our body and move on, I believe many beings have robes that they wear, just as Mother Mary does, right? And it is their robe that is their energy fields of a kind, right? With the color
Yes.
of their energy field, of the whatever stars or whatever energy field she's coming from, or they're coming from, or we will come from. So that came in the robe of spirit when I said that in the poem. And also, it's interesting. I think this came through actually because we were working together. Because I talked also, which I feel strongly about, the sacred chalice. I said that there is a sacred chalice that is offered in your name, and obviously you work with this all the time. The sacrament is given to lift what words can't say. And again, I found that chalice to be a very powerful, literal field of energy that you can receive from, that you literally can receive a blessing of a sacrament from God as well. You want to address robe or sacrament first?
Sacrament is such a big thing for me. But let's begin with the robe, because before we start mass, the priest gets robed, and you go through a set of prayers. It's not just throw something on and run off to the altar. You go through prayers, you ask for blessings. So in the sacristy, the part of getting dressed is a part of protection.
I didn't know
Some
that. Wow.
yes. I'll actually send you the prayers. They are so beautiful. And um, so you ask for prayer, or you ask for protection while you get dressed, and you ask that you be pure. And so then we go up to the altar and we start with mass. And in the Eucharistic prayer, where we then raise the chalice, something that for me is really important is the fact that the chalice is empty at the beginning of mass. So we cannot ask for God to fill us if there's already anything in that chalice. And that is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. I mean, it's a clean chalice, which then gets filled with what is to become the blood of Christ. And of course, in the Catholic tradition, it is not a symbolic thing that happens. For us, it really becomes the blood of the Lord that then is offered for us, and we share that in communion and into ourselves, and we take the sacrifice of the Lord into ourselves with the redemption that it brought. And for me, that redemption is unconditional love.
Beautifully said. In some teachings I've read about in mystical Christianity, that the blood of Christ actually carried, now I'm talking about Jesus Christ as a man, the blood of Christ carried a frequency and an energy field that was very, very powerful, and that this was part of what happened when he did die on the cross and his blood poured forth. That blood was carried such strong energy that at that time there was a shift from his blood alone that was very, very powerful. And so thinking about that field of energy, that transforming blood, which was tied into the highest light, carried such a power that there's some that believe it really changed the frequencies and energies at that time of what was going on in the world. So when I'm trying to, visualize that energy of actually becoming and bringing that energy field into your chalice. And when you said about the chalice being empty, there's an old Zen story. And I don't know, have it memorized, but the idea of it was there was a student who was working so hard and so long and always reading every book and everything. And he went to the abbot and the roshi at the temple, and he started talking, saying he's been searching so hard and so long. And it goes on and on and on about how and what would happen and how he really needs to see what enlightenment is. And so there's a teacup there. And as he's talking, the roshi abbot starts pouring tea and pouring tea and pouring tea and pouring tea and pouring tea until it's overflowing over the cup and down on the ground. The student said, well, stop, it's just going everywhere. He says, until your cup is empty, you can't get an answer. If you're always putting all that out, you're not open to receive. And that's really something that's a beautiful message, because it's interesting. I get these messages every day, and then I have to decide up to me what I'm going to do with them. This one pretty clearly spoke that it wanted to be, with your help, something that would be a message that would come out through song. But then I have thousands of, I literally have thousands of them. And it's like, okay, it's one thing to get a message, but then using what you have in the message and being discerning enough to know which one is going to be the message that could go out there, not only for you as an individual, but for you in communion, which is the message and the sacrament that comes in that will be the right thing. Maybe just the tone of your voice or the energy you carry as you do your sacrament that will stick with someone or make a difference in their life.
No, definitely. For me, the time that we experiencing now has completely emptied my chapel of people, and so we do mass every Sunday is online, and it's both a blessing and a curse, because Mass to me is a very personal thing now. Though the camera is there, it is a communion with myself and God. And I forget that other people are there. So there's no really airs and graces. And I've been lucky enough to set up the IT part so that I can let it run and I can say Mass and incorporate music if I in the Mass, but there are no distractions. The sad part, of course, is that communion with God, we want to have it with other people. So in time, I hope that the chapel will be filled with people again. But at the moment, people hear the message, and that communion is shared across the world. We have some amazing people who log in to view Mass, because we are a slightly different order. You know, we don't have all the rules of if you believe this way, or if you see life in a different way, that you are not welcome in our church. Everybody is welcome here, because that's the second rule that we follow, is that Jesus never said no to anybody. So the communion that I have here is shared by whomever needs to hear it. And then you will get a message from Portugal or from the Philippines, just saying, we watched Mass and thank you. Just for the ability to be together. And then for me, one of the most amazing things that started happening is the fact that we offer Mass up for people. And one day I made the decision, let's open it up energetically, and prayed about it. And since that day, there's been almost a daily request. Please, can you say Mass for us? Or just keep us in prayer. And it is the most beautiful thing to be able to serve the Lord and to help our fellow man, listening to when Spirit speaks.
I know you said Mass for my sister Pamela, and it made a huge impact on me. And I know you said Mass for me and Stephen Melillo, and he said it meant so much to him. And yes, indeed, it does. I think we put Mass out there as something that is way beyond the average person's realm. And when you started doing that, it was making it reachable, understandable. It made it personal in a way that connected. The fact that indeed we could even be included in that, it meant very, very much, and it is something that is very special. And addressing the private form of communion with God versus when we're on Zoom or whether you're streaming it. I've been teaching on Insight Timer app, and I started doing some live ones, and it was so interesting how different I felt versus just me talking into a microphone or doing it privately versus thinking there's someone else there that might be watching. And my first instinct was to kind of limit it, limit myself, because it for me felt so interior and so private, because I do it in private, and you don't want anyone to take this most intimate energy you have with the love of God, and I love God so much that I don't want anyone to misunderstand or take away from my love of God, you know. And so I found myself holding back how I really would do it all by myself versus when someone else is watching, and then my doubts, would they understand this or would they understand that? So I think it's beautiful that you've been able to address that as well. And did you go through some of that same feelings when you were doing your masses by yourself versus when it's streaming?
Yes, most definitely. And I mean, this morning's Mass was about Abraham, who had to sacrifice his own son. And because he wanted to be closer to God, and that was the requirement. And to me, that is, we have to sacrifice the thing that we hate to sacrifice, and that is our own self and our own ego. And once that happens, I mean, it's also not something that happens once. It is a daily, it's almost every minute you must be aware of the fact that the ego is there. And but at some stage, if we're lucky, we get that opportunity to hand it all over to God, and then it doesn't matter, because we are in perfect harmony with the universe and with this universal symphony, and we play our part.
Beautifully said. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace, right? Let me.
Yes.
And when you do that, you sent me actually a beautiful video once of St. Francis Peace Prayer. And I got so much out of it. And then I was going to do it on a talk on Rotary, and I found out that St. Francis didn't actually say that, and that it was
Yes.
actually written later, I guess much later, maybe 100, 200 years ago, by one of his disciples. And then I thought, well, isn't that amazing that some disciple, and they don't know exactly the year, I don't think, but that some disciple felt it so strongly that it was able to get that message out there. And all these years later, and again, that's an example of letting the ego go, right? People will accept St. Francis and think it's St. Francis' prayer because he's St. Francis, but they wouldn't and will never know who actually wrote that beautiful prayer, right?
And the big question is, and does it matter?
That's it. No, I don't think in God's eyes it matters, maybe in man's eyes, but
Yes. And
that being that instrument and being a messenger and being someone offering themselves as a servant. And I think you're right. And I hope people understand this. This isn't a one-time thing. When you're doing this and you've been touched by God, you do this every day, just as you do and I do. We do this because it is something that we've offered ourselves to, and it's not like you get it and then it's over. It's a daily practice. I do think of the Pope and the trials and tribulations and what he goes through. Here and I think he does a beautiful job. Again, he's calling himself Francis, but he's done a beautiful job. But boy, it's not like you just say, okay, I'm the Pope and it's over. I mean, the challenges actually get more and more and more when you try to take it on. And then if we want to take it from the Pope to Jesus, and to what you have to do to sacrifice yourself to that,
definitely.
being willing to give yourself up totally to that with the ultimate faith and the ultimate
Yes.
test and trials you get.
And is that not becoming the empty chalice?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And those lessons that you learn, and I've been learning a lot. I mean, you continue to learn, and sometimes as you're on the path, they seem to be more, challenging. And when you go through what you've gone through in South Africa, and we go through in COVID around the world, we've had more lessons than ever that I can think of in this last year. And bringing it back, because we only have a minute or two left, I think, um, when I wrote "In the Hands of God" in the words, they were yes, coming from my sister, but they really were about what so many have gone through in America. 500,000 plus dead, more than all of the wars that Americans have died in, including World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War. And that's just America, around the world. This has been a time we've had to look at what the sacrifice is and what's going on, and trusting and having faith in spite of the challenges. And I really felt that that's part of the message of "In the Hands of God," because you have to at one point and it happened with my sister, just have to turn it over to God. And no amount of your thinking or trying to figure it out, or is it fair, is it right, ever, will never be answered. And that's when you release it and turn it over to being in the hands of God.
Definitely. And that's also with the knowledge that it's not the end. I mean, it's just opening eyes into a new world.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. It's always such a pleasure and the comfort to know that that you're there. You've been not just a comfort spiritually, but a friend, and been someone who understands in such a beautiful way. That is the reason that this um, EP is possible, because you were able to understand. And I'm just thrilled about the fact that you could embrace and envision this with the same feeling that I have, and that we were able to connect. You being in South Africa and me being here on Maui, but you've become a wonderful friend and teacher and guide along the way. So I bow deeply to you. I do. I bow deeply to you and to that spirit that speaks to you so clearly and so powerfully, that you follow as well. And I know you're blessing so many in your world. So I just have to say a big, big mahalo, namaste, and also aloha.
It is a massive honor and pleasure to be able to serve. And thank you for the words that started it all.
Thank you, God,
Thank you, God.
because that's where it comes from. Aloha.
Amen.
Amen.